Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's great to see so many new faces. I want to especially appreciate the folks from the Vincent Institute who showed up today. It is in large part due to their collaborations with Brent that we invited him back today. Brent is a Warnell class of 2000. Brent Widener is a class of 2000 Warnell graduate. Knocked around on some Warnell projects for a while after that, and then for the last 17 years have been in a series of roles at Fort Benning. For those of you who are not Georgia people, Fort Benning is down just east of Columbus, a large military installation where a lot of cavalry training happens. Yes,
infantry, armor, cavalry.
Yeah. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about how do you get from Warnell to a position like this. I'm sure that it's not a path that anybody could repeat exactly, but some of the decisions and challenges along the way, but also some of the constraints and opportunities of doing large scale conservation on federal lands as part of a federal agency. Yes, that's great. So with that, Brent Widener.
Thank you. Everybody doing good this afternoon? Whoever your professors are must be giving y'all extra credit or something. At least it's not 3:30 on a Friday. I remember Dr. Brian Chapman would always make us go to lab on like 2 o'clock on a Friday. We would never get back till 6 in the afternoon, and it was always a fall course, so you couldn't get prepared for the football game. Y'all, just kind of a quick agenda. My intent of what to go over today. I will share this. I would ask y'all to please be engaged. Please ask questions. I don't want to stand up here and quote lecture at somebody for 45 minutes or an hour and then hold questions till the end. So if there's something that piques your interest or you're like, hey, I'd like to know more about that, please don't hesitate. Just jump in, throw a hand up. Let's try and make it conversational if you would. All right. I'll say this. I don't think, what year does that say? Spring quarter 98. I guarantee you, I never thought I'd be standing in the front of this classroom talking to a bunch of students about, what I do now or how I got to where I am. But that quote right there stuck with me. Dr. Warren, Dr. Green stood right here together and they played off of each other. It rings true in everything I do every day, in every relationship. Managing the resources easy is the people that make it difficult. And it'll ring true. It probably rings true for whatever you're working on right now. If you're an undergrad working on a senior project, you're probably dealing with some of those challenges. If you're a graduate student trying to get somebody to give you access to something or get something you need, or you're waiting on a professor to respond to something, it's the people that make it difficult. What could go wrong? All kinds of stuff. There's a whole laundry list of them there, but what could go wrong in the federal government? Well, we change elected officials at least every 4 or 8 years, and it's like a pendulum, right? Working just with the pendulum swinging constantly. So, but all kinds of variables that relate to people making it difficult. I want to start with this, kind of at least what I see after 25 years of professional employment and various roles and responsibilities. Get to know folks. And I'm going to go to a slide here in a minute to let you all get to know me a little bit better. But get to know folks. Take time. Hey, what you do this weekend? How's your significant other? How are the kids? How's the family? Get to know people. Build that personal relationship. Because the fact that people are what make things difficult, you get to know folks truly as people. It makes getting through the other pieces of it a lot more easy. 80-20 rule. We work a lot with people we're the Department of Defense. We blow things up, right? We go to war. We work tightly with people like the Nature Conservancy or Georgia Department of Natural Resources or USDA and RCS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And generally everything we work on, and I didn't make this rule up, right? A lot of people have been talking about it for a long time, but 80% of the issues, we're on common ground, right? If you find a way to focus on those 80, recognize the differences in the 20, you're going to have a lot better chance of finding success in whatever it is you're working on. Listen to hear. got to be willing to accept and provide constructive, professional, respectful feedback. Somebody says something to you, hurts your feelings, you ain't gonna get far. You've got to be willing to give and receive constructive feedback, reflect on it. I really believe in this one, y'all. I didn't always. Probably 1995, I knew everything. No doubt in my mind. But to this point, every time I open my mouth, I'm just assuming that whatever's coming out of it's wrong. Now, I generally feel confident in it, but I'm always operating an assumption that somebody's going to challenge me on it. They might be right, and I might be. Collaboration, but I do believe firmly, you got your core values, right? Your morals, your ethics, whatever they are. Don't compromise on those, but you got to collaborate. And then toughest of times bring out the worst. Then the best. I'll talk a little bit about that from an education perspective when I share more about me. And then long-term success comes from failures, sometimes massive ones. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the interest of Fort Bennett and the Army, DOD, kind of in the Endangered Species Act realm, and where things started off really, really bad, but they've turned into really, really good. I didn't put it on here. I don't think it's on another slide though, but the other thing I would add is success is only temporary. So if you ever think you've achieved whatever it is, just recognize that that success is only temporary. You quit pushing, you're gonna come through. All right, so this is just a personal introduction about me. I like to tell folks I was born and raised in Marietta, but I grew up in Herndon, Georgia. I don't know if anybody knows where Herndon, Georgia is, but it's like right somewhere right in there on the Geechee River. It's an old railroad town. Population about 11. I'm serious to this day. But I had the good blessing of my family, my grandfather, my father, myself, all getting to go down there as children growing up. Watch the longleaf pine hills get cut down and replaced with, loblolly plantations. Watch the hardwood bottoms that you could see 600 yards through hit the ground and go to Thompson Oak, Florida, and Thompson, Georgia. Fished the river, hunted the river. So that's kind of where I always said, okay, I'm gonna go to the University of Georgia, I'm gonna get a degree in hunting and fishing, and I'm never gonna sit behind a desk. And now what do I do every day? I sit behind a desk. I carry this planter around to keep up with everything that's going on. Graduated here in 2000, as Duncan said, spent a year working for Jay Shelton in the fisheries lab. Got the blessing to be able to go down to the Cody River with DNR and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, electrofish, robust red horse, artificially spawned them on the bank of the river. They took them to the Warren Springs hatchery, hatched them out, put them in the ponds at the hatcheries across the state, and then eventually they ended up back in the rivers of Georgia. And then probably the greatest professional formative years of my life were spent down in South Georgia. Brent Faircloth, who got his undergrad degree here and then proceeded to go straight from an undergrad to a PhD without ever getting a master's. Went down to Tall Timbers Research Station and did bobwhite quail genetics research. And Brent said that the project that Jay had dried up. He said, Brent, come down here to Tall Timbers and help me. And y'all, if you ever get an opportunity, if any of you are undergrads, you're looking for something to do, the pay's terrible, the conditions suck. You're going to work long hours, you're going to be hot, and you're going to be tired, you're going to be miserable, and it's the best thing you can do. I would strongly encourage y'all, if you're looking for something to do, Tall Timbers is a great place to go really get grounded and rooted in conservation, particularly if I maintain southeastern ecosystems. Great place, great people. I got the opportunity after that to go work for a private landowner, basically a billionaire, on the old Mitchell Swift place, which was right on the Georgia-Florida line. 4 years there, basically wrote the wildlife management plan, did all the timber thinning operations, all the reforestation operations, herbicide treatments, managed fish ponds. Great opportunity. It's what I thought I always wanted to do when I was growing up. And then I got there and I was like, I really enjoy this, but I kind of felt like I was a well-paid indentured servant. I was at their beck and call 24/7, 52 weeks a year, and had another opportunity to go back and work for Tall Timbers, managing all-site research forest on Pebble Hill Plantation down there. Got hung out to dry on some soft grant money, and literally my wife quit work, went back to school in August. February the 2nd of the next year, found out I lost my job. February 5th, we found out she was pregnant with her first child. So, whatever you go through in life, just know that there's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that present themselves. But what did that do? That opened up an opportunity to go work for the U.S. Army at Fort Benning, and 17 years later, I'm the division chief. So, keep pushing, keep working hard. You can see there the things that I've done. Kind of just drew some circles on that map. I was going to start with this. I talked about failures, right? Fall of 95, 1.67 GPA here at the University of Georgia. 2 C's and a D. See up there, FORS 3580. There's a long story, but Brian Chapman was the vertebrate natural history teacher, professor at the time. He gave me a -87 on the paper. A -87 on the paper. Needless to say, I got the opportunity to retake that class. I showed up with a different attitude and a different approach. The only person on this entire campus who ever gave me a grade, the second time I took that class, I made a C. I earned a C. And that man gave me a B. So, what you do and what your attitude is matters. All right, enough of that. Cool story. So when I was working for the private landowner, Mitchell Swift Place, part of the old Greenwood plantation. I don't know if that means anything to y'all, but like one of the biggest plantations in South Georgia, Thomasville. And then at Pebble Hill as well, I got the great opportunity to work with Leon Neal, who worked with Herbert Stoddard, to do all the forest management. And so standing there one day with Mr. Neal in Wards Creek, we're just talking about stuff. He doesn't tell me this story. I read about it years later when Tall Timbers publishes this article, but literally had the opportunity to work on that place, work in that drainage, saw where their spruce pine stood, and unbeknownst to me, 50 years earlier, Herbert Stoddard standing there looking at ivory-billed woodpeckers. So that was pretty cool. I just wanted to share that story. It was one that meant a lot to me. I guess the bigger point there is you're going to get lots of opportunities around a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, and take the time to stop and listen and learn what they have to share. Mr. Neal was a wealth of knowledge. There's a lot of folks still running around here with some of the knowledge he had, but Herbert Stoddard and Leon Neal are not here for us to learn from anymore. Take the opportunity to learn. All right. I'm going to move forward now and really into kind of Fort Benning and the military mission, and then talk a little bit about our environmental responsibilities, and then really do a deeper dive into natural resources management on the installation and partnership efforts that we have at Fort Benning. So, are y'all familiar enough with Georgia to know where Columbus is? You see Fort Benning there. $4.75 billion economic impact in the region. Lots of jobs, lots of people supported by that military installation being there. Daily population of about 100,000 folks. So it's like managing a city. It's 182,000 acres, pretty much the size of an entire county in the state of Georgia. On average, somewhere, I think somebody told me the other day, like the 100th largest, something like that. But a big piece of dirt, 182,000 acres, 30 million square feet of facilities, about $1 billion worth of infrastructure, 35,000 soldiers there every day, about 100,000 folks on post. So a lot going on. Just to kind of show you some old pictures. Fort Benning, the Army Department of Defense bought the land that Fort Benning sits on, the first piece of it in 1919. So about 105, 106 years ago. And I added that bullet in there. Basically, it says 105 years of land stewardship, some of it passively, some of it very active, applied management. And so thought this was a cool graphic to share. And it'll zoom in a little bit, but that's a 1944 aerial image of the installation. And y'all can kind of see all these white spots. So think about that being, not too far past the point at which we had deforested everything, European settlement. Forests are kind of knocked to the ground. There's a few remnant areas. Those are all RCW cavity trees that are currently on Fort Benning, scattered around on that map. There it is, forested. This is a dudded impact area, so about 10,000 acres here on Fort Benning that basically nobody goes in. We just fire munitions into it, small arms and big gun. But as a result, what do y'all think? If you fire bullets or munitions into the woods, what happens? Somebody?
Lights the woods on fire.
What's that?
Lights the woods on fire.
Light the woods on fire. So for 105 years, that area right there has been catching on fire. Not lightning, not natural, man influenced for sure, but been catching on fire. So if we zoom in on that area, what do y'all see? What does somebody tell me what you see there?
Ashes.
Yeah. Drainages kind of with the rest of it kind of cleared. These green dots now are from the first survey that we ever did. Nature Conservancy actually did it. Of the cavity trees that were found. Look where those birds are. They're hanging on in the edges of the drainages, right? Their whole upland habitat that we think of where those, longleaf ecosystem obligates all exist and thrive. They're all hanging on in the edge of the drainages. There they are now. So that's what it looked like. 1944. That's an aerial image from a couple of years ago. And we've done nothing but fire bullets in there. No active management, no timber stand improvement, just fire. And now I added in the purple dots where those RCWs are now. And then for the last one, I'm gonna go back. And you can see now, you're starting to get some cavity trees that are starting to pop into some of these areas that were, otherwise devoid of timber. So it's just a cool graphic, I think, y'all, for kind of recognizing and understanding what time and the influence of fire can do to a landscape. All right. Just some cool stats from Fort Benning. 120 millimeter tank rounds in the entire Army 3rd Corps. I don't know if anybody knows what a corps is, but a lot of people, about 50, 60,000 soldiers in a corps. So we're firing 25 to 30,000, 120 millimeter tank rounds. You know what a millimeter is. 40 to 50 million 5.56 rounds. So, small arms fired out of a service weapon. Huge simulation center, y'all. Cool stuff down there. You can go get in a box. I think maybe a couple folks in this room have done it. Go get in a box and it's like you're driving an M1 Abrams tank and firing the main gun on the tank and engaging targets. Pretty cool stuff. All right, I really just want to put this, I stole this slide from somebody else, but just to give you spatial context. This is to scale, that's Metro Atlanta. How many of y'all from Atlanta? Handful. So that's Metro Atlanta overlaid onto Fort Benning. Big place. All right. What do you think the natural areas on military training installation look like? I probably cheated and gave you too much information to start with. Somebody, what do you, if you've never been on one, who's never been on a military installation? Hands up. Most folks, some folks have been there. What do you think it looks like?
Scary.
Scary? What else?
Disturbance routine.
What's that?
High disturbance.
High disturbance? Anybody else? Nobody? Somebody? What's that? Barren land. Yeah, just a barren wasteland, right? Stole these images off the internet. I gave them some credit. I am talking to an academic group of folks. So I cited Those are pictures from Vietnam, right? I mean, a lot of people, they hear military installation, that's what they think, right? Denuded landscapes, just barren landscapes. Everything's blown up. It's nasty. It's ugly. That's what the forest on Fort Benning looked like. Not really what folks would expect, right? 90,000 acres on Fort Benning. They don't all look quite that pretty, right? But 90,000 acres of 182,000 acres. Big, open, pretty piney wood savannas, wildflowers blooming, spring and fall. Diverse communities of red-cockaded woodpeckers and gopher tortoises and eastern diamondbacks and gopher frogs. You name it. Just the whole commensal obligate group of species that are associated with the longleaf pine ecosystem. We got southern hognose. I don't know if y'all saw it, but listed decision coming out from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service after it was petitioned. We have those two. So 105 years, fire on the landscape, no residential, no commercial, no agricultural development, no row crop growing of pine trees, just letting the natural system for 105 years kind of come back with a little bit of influence from man to steward that landscape. All right. Foreign defense. DOD on an annual basis spends $4 billion with a B environmental compliance, whether that's strict regulatory compliance with like RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act for hazardous waste, whether it's endangered species, whatever it may be, $4 billion a year. Army natural resources expenditure, $60 million. So a lot of money being spent. Why do y'all think the Army and the DOD would spend a lot of money on conservation? I got an idea. Somebody's got an idea.
So you have somewhere to train.
So they have somewhere to train? Great answer, right? The Department of Defense, the Army, they're not getting more land, but they are always going to have the everlasting mission of training soldiers, airmen, Marines, when needed to go defend our freedoms. So they got to sustain that landscape, right? You got to steward that landscape in perpetuity so that it's always there. If you go out there and destroy it, you're not going to have what you need to train soldiers. The military mission and environmental requirements are often complementary, but not always. An M1 Abrams running over and could literally run over, the 18-inch DBH longleaf pine tree is not really going to go well for everything if we go do that everywhere. Firing big weapons into mature stands of pine trees or hardwood bottoms is going to do what you said, right? Denuded, destroyed, whatever it may be. But for the most part, they're complementary and they're sustaining each other, sustaining the landscape, building resiliency in the landscape, and sustaining the mission and building resiliency for the mission. Really cool graphic down here on the bottom left, y'all. That's number of species per 100,000 hectares. Endangered species or impaired species, depending on which bar it is. But there's 800 million acres of public land in the U.S. 650 of it owned by the federal government. 30 million acres of which is owned and managed by DOD. 12 million owned and managed by the Army. Greater than 20. This is data from about 2008, so it's not 100% dead on still, but the theme is still there. You can see right here, greater than 20% of ESA species are on DOD lands, while we're only responsible for approximately 3% of all federally owned managed lands. There's a lot of good things happening on DOD lands. Questions, thoughts, comments? Oh, y'all are quiet group. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question. We had a comment earlier about there's never been like agriculture or any of that on, were you referring to the entirety of Fort Benning?
So
Okay.
great point. So I'm talking about since 1919, when the federal government acquired the land through eminent domain from the people that owned it. Absolutely 100% in that first graphic. So before the installation was acquired, all the traditional practices that European settlers did, right, to remove the forest and farm the land. And those of you that like Providence came to State Park down just south of us, right? All that erosion, all that stuff that went into our streams, that all happened. But since the Army acquired it, basically, what would have otherwise been, let's take Athens, for example. It's been 25 years since I lived here. I drove up here yesterday through the back roads coming to town through Oconee County. That was all farmland. That was all pasture. That was all forest land. And now it's neighborhoods, or abandoned agricultural lands in many cases. I saw a lot of that. So that's what I meant by that. Thank you for that clarity.
Yeah, and do you guys do timber harvesting
We do.
currently?
We do. So we don't do a whole lot of timber harvest operations in our hardwood areas. It's more just passive. Fire runs in there during our prescribed fire operations or any wildfires that happen on installation. But all of the uplands, absolutely, we keep all 90,000 acres on a 10-year survey interval. So we're going back and whatever that number comes out to, it's about 9,000 acres a year that we're inventorying. And then anytime we do any kind of clear cut and reforestation or any kind of timber stand improvement action, we'll update that forest inventory accordingly based on what we did. So, others?
What is valuable as other wood? Because of all those bullets, are they like in
Yeah.
the trees causing problems? with
Yep.
the metals?
So there's certain areas we can't sell timber. So downrange of especially where they fire the small arms, great point. A lot of bullets going in there. So we do have to make sure that it's merchantable. But for the most part, that's probably 10-15% of landscape where there might be bullet contamination. We refer to it as bullet contamination. But for the most part, yeah, the mills will still take it. It still has the same value, but they won't take it at all if it's full of bullets. Others? Yes, sir.
I did have a question actually on the subject of bullets. All the munitions on the landscape, does that cause problems with contaminants like heavy metal?
Yep, great question. So the modern stuff, no. We're not putting the lead out there or any of that stuff anymore. Some of the older stuff, absolutely. We do a fair bit of stream monitoring and sampling on the installation. And there's a few spots that are a little dirty. It'd be unfair to say they're not, but for the most part, there's really not a whole lot of impacts. The places that we see stuff are places where they did, a number of, more complex mission activities in areas where they would have done something over and over and over and over and over and over 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. But we really don't see a whole lot. We have a few places, we have a few places where we do have some contamination that we have to monitor. Generally speaking, though, the federal laws for those contaminants, if it's on an active range, it's all exempt. Because there's no way to hold you accountable there. It's still accomplished the mission, so. Yeah, those active ranges are exempt. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Well, the land is for trading, or is there some kind of economic byproduct?
Yeah,
We are cutting them and we're selling the wood. Okay.
yep, absolutely. Yep. So, and actually across the Army, all the Army installations, all the timber revenue that is generated off all Army installation goes into a pot of money each year. And then specifically the installations request projects to fund out of those dollars, to put, conservation activities or buy new tilt beds or new dozers or new engines or whatever it may be. So absolutely. And then the other thing to that point is recreational use. We have about somewhere in the neighborhood about 3,000 permitted hunters and fishermen on the installation every year. So when it's not scheduled for military training, it's open for recreational use. Go hunting and fishing and ride bikes and go bird watching and all of those activities. Yes, sir. Or ma'am.
Got it.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of your fire program, like how many acres you guys try to get?
I'll show you in a little while. One more right there.
I remember like it's closed, like certain rate to be closed. Was that all created, saying don't let touch this, or is that like condition count?
Like closed for,
Like we could go,
oh, when y'all were down there working?
yeah, I was stationed.
Oh, you were stationed in Fort Benning. Yeah, so, generally speaking, if a range is down, it's because there's some targetry or system on it that's not functioning properly and they've got to fix it. The only alternative to that is if we schedule something for a timber harvest operation, we'll shut it down long enough for us to be able to go in there to do that.
I remember that.
Yes,
Do you guys need able to like breeding season periods and not firing ammunition to a certain area? You know, an enterfly and that.
no, we do have some areas where, well, pretty much the population of RCWs in particular has grown so much at this point that we really don't limit folks with respect to what they can do. For years, the Army would say, hey, if you're near a cluster, you can't do anything that makes noise within 200 feet of the tree. And noise being like blowing something up. You can't drive a vehicle in there, a number of things, but as time has gone on, we found that generally speaking, the species are adapted and resilient to all the activities that are happening out there. So there's really not a whole lot of restriction. All right, yes, sir.
You need any sort of top secret clearance, any sort of clearance, but
I don't have any clearance. It depends on what you do. Obviously, some have to, secret or top secret clearance, but in my role, I don't do anything that requires me to have any higher level security clearance. You gotta be vetted, you gotta undergo a background check, all that kind of stuff.
Just a follow question regarding that, how many months a year is the installation closed for?
Is it closed for training?
Yes.
Yeah, it really never closes. We do have Christmas exodus. So the commanding general will generally from about December 19th or 20th through a day or two after the new year, stop training on the installation. But other than that, it really is no stop. Every day, Monday through Sunday, there's somebody out on the range training something. All right, y'all. So how do we do all this? I work for the director of public works. I talked earlier, we got, 182,000 acres, 30 million square feet of facilities, 100,000 people. Just like a municipality, just like a city, we're managing all the roads, all the buildings, all the air conditionings, all the training assets, all the ranges. Our environmental division, that's me up there as the environmental division chief. One GS employee, one government employee, that's what that means. And then we've got a planning section that does NEPA, cultural, finances, manpower stuff. We have 5 government civilians, 8 ICSA employees, intergovernmental support agreement employees. It's actually kind of 8.5. But those people are actually UGA employees. They work for the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. And they help us with those aspects of environmental compliance on the installation. Natural resources, we got 20 folks out there, 14 of which are on call on a rotating schedule, 2 at a time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to respond to any wildfires, of which we have about 100 a year that we have to respond to. So to put that in the context of 52 weeks a year, a couple a week on average. That's not a lot of people. When I first got there, we were almost twice as many people as what we have right now. And then on the compliance side, we got 7 GS employees and 17 people on the ICSA staff. Those folks are actually through an intergovernmental support agreement with Auburn University. And they're doing the strict RCRA, EPCRA, clean air, clean water, all those aspects, Safe Drinking Water Act, all those aspects of environmental compliance. So all told, about 65 of us that are doing all the environmental, non-discretionary environmental compliance requirements on installation. Your question? What's that? Right now, they're pretty safe. We actually fared pretty well over the past 9 months. We had two people in our division decide to take the early retirement program. The way our organization that we worked for in the Army approached it was anything that was already vacant. So like if we had an announcement out and we were trying to hire somebody, they took those. And then with the people who voluntarily decided to leave, we had enough. So right now, everybody that's in those positions is pretty secure. When we'll be able to start hiring again, I don't know. Right now, no earlier than December 31st, I can tell you that much. Yes, sir.
On average, like how many acres are burning in that?
About 60,000 acres a year is prescribed burn. That's our goal, 60 to 70,000 acres.
You said wildfires too, right?
Oh, wildfires, yeah. About 5,000 acres a year and about 100 wildfires, roughly. I got a really cool graphic I'll show you that it'll kind of bring some of that up. All right. So NEPA is the underpinning of what we do. I'm sure some of y'all have heard about NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. You know, the rivers were on fire and burning across this country. Nobody was taking care of anything. It was just kind of a free for all. NEPA says basically you're going to look at everything you do. You're going to analyze it. You're going to think about it. You're going to make a good plan before you execute. It is not designed to stop you from doing anything. It is designed to make you stop, slow down, analyze, think about what you're doing, do minimization or mitigation efforts to minimize the impact, and then execute. At this point on Fort Bennett, really, the NEPA process is ingrained in everything that we do, whether it's a training exercise, some kind of construction project or repair or renovation project. Very early stages, we're at the table, we're talking to folks. We really are what I refer to as doing mitigation by design. So we're thinking about whatever the project is or the action that's going to happen. We're saying, hey, if you shift this a little this way, that won't create this issue. Or if you can do this at this time, it won't create that issue. And we're really trying to find a way to yes in everything that we do. And so what we're doing now, I would argue, is incorporating all of that NEPA stuff into the daily operations. So that when we get the finished thing that says, hey, we're going to go do this, we can go check, you're good. So that's kind of fully ingrained, and it's really just a culture of compliance. We review about, it varies year to year, anywhere from about 850 to 1,200 individual actions on an annual basis, whether that's you know, a range that's firing. They may do that same training on that same range 200 days a year, but we only review it one time because they're doing the same repetitive action out there. But we're doing about, let's just say on average, about 1,000 actions a year that we're reviewing. And then just as an environmental overview to give you a little bit of scope and context and scale of what those people are doing, I put 1,100 on this slide. We have 50 clean air and active emission sources, the stationary source we have to track, 9 federally protected species, 50 to 65,000 is the number on here. It's really about 60 to 70 now. That's our goal every year. 160 hazardous waste satellite accumulation areas, one central accumulation area where we store all the hazardous waste for disposal within 90 days. 3,500 archaeological sites. We have 16 federally recognized tribes with cultural affiliations to Fort Benning. So we have to consult with all of those. 2 times a year, we meet with them and talk about everything that's happening on the installation. 970 miles of streams, 14,000 acres of wetlands. Got about any given day, about 40 construction projects that are under that open and active NEPD's permit. Yes, sir.
You have 3,000 outdoor enthusiasts. What type of outdoor recreation y'all allow?
Most of those are hunters and fishermen. We've got bike trails. We got a lot of folks who just go out and ride the miles and miles and miles of roads that are scattered across the installation as well. We got a few folks who like to go bird watching. We have a number of folks who like to go dig up roots and other such things for consumption. It just varies, all kinds of stuff. We don't manage as many as we used to. We got 5 ponds now that we still try to actively manage. It's tough there. They're relatively small. They're 8 acres, they're 10 acres, they're 25 acres. When you got a bunch of folks out there trying to use them, and you can only regulate to a degree. We got, just like the county, we got one conservation law enforcement officer out there running around trying to regulate all the sportsmen on an entire 182,000 acres. It's just tough. It's tough to keep things in balance and stocked but, we're constantly restocking fish and we got feeders on a few ponds and fertilizing ponds and liming them as they need it, so.
These on the periphery, so people don't have to go through a gate, like they
They
have
do.
this one.
Yeah, everybody's gotta come through a gate. Those 3,000 folks, the vast majority are active duty or retired military, civilians that work on the installation, or those people can take guests. So, yeah, everybody's gotta be vetted to come in the gate. There's not anywhere on Fort Benning. You can walk in if you're hunting a boundary spot. You can walk in from the boundary as long as you're vetted and legal. But generally speaking, the only way to get on the Fort Benning is to come through a gated access control point. Yes, sir.
I know there's a lot of ecosystem service credits that can be, certificated, are they? I see that.
We do a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Yeah, lots of ecosystem value associated not only with Fort Benning, but some of the properties that we help support management of by our partners outside the fence line. The two primary statutory natural resources, I'm going to shift now really kind of into more natural resources. The two primary statutory obligations, the Sites Act, which broadly promotes coordination, conservation, management, natural resource. It basically says the Secretary of Defense will manage DoD lands and afford recreational access, and oversimplified. Summary in the Endangered Species Act, which we all know about, protects the threatened endangered species or those candidates or proposed for listing and their habitats. Just a list of the species that are protected. Some of these are protected because they are on the installation. They're highlighted in yellow. Some of them are protected because Fish and Wildlife Service or somebody designated critical habitat, or we're in the right range or we're in the right place, but we've never found it, but it could still be there. So these are kind of the species that are really driving us daily basis. And then just some quick pictures. It's a big old snag that was on the side of the road that our natural resources team had to go cut down before they started prescribed fire ops, fire break. Big old largemouth in one of our ponds that we've kind of since lost. That was in Kings Pond. One of our, we have our own electrofishing boat, so we'll go sample and collect data and try to figure out what we need to do. Down there at the bottom, one of our technicians with RCW working it up, banding it. Wildfire, we talked about a little bit. Wildfire over there in that top left, that's ammunition boxes on a range. So I think that was 2000. I don't remember, was it 16 when it got so dry? I can't remember. But a lot of prescribed fire, a lot of wildfires on Fort Benning. The good news is everything's in about a 2 to 3 year fire return. So that on the left is about as bad as it gets if we get into a drought and have a wildfire. But having that frequent fire return interval makes a big difference for us. As I talked about, we plant a few fields on the installation, facilitate recreational access towards DNR all the time, comes and gives us fish to help stock our ponds. Smoke management, those of you that are familiar with prescribed fire operations know that that's an important consideration. Columbus, metropolitan area, second largest, at least today, maybe till tomorrow if Augusta takes. We kind of fight for that position regularly, but everything we do is really laser focused on trying to keep all that smoke away from sensitive areas, which is quite an undertaking when you start thinking about trying to burn 60 to 70,000 acres from roughly November, December to June, pretty much. Out of that, we'll usually get about 37 to 45 burn days out of that window of time to be able to knock out 60 to 70,000 acres. I know y'all talk about this too, wild and urban interface. So we talked a little bit about it before, on the installation, since acquisition, no development, there's development. I mean, we have developed areas on installation, but that one on the left is you know, we're doing prescribed fire operations right up to that neighborhood. So getting a good solid northwest or west wind is critically important. It's gonna be sustained for a couple days. Right, so we don't have a bunch of smoke back into that neighborhood. You know, nuisance wildlife issues, people complaining because there's big guns firing and it's too loud at their house, and all kinds of challenges associated with wildlife interface on military installation. All right, I'm gonna play this video, y'all. I talked a little bit earlier about, hey, sometimes the biggest of failures lead to great success. Some of y'all may have seen or heard about this before. This is a video from North Carolina talking about the woodpecker wars. I think it's fair to say that a number of years ago, the Army, DoD as a whole just chose to kind of ignore the ESA for about the first 15 years that it came out. So. So I'm a big believer in partnerships. There's only so much each of us can do individually, but if we pull all of our resources together, focus back on that 80%, there's a lot more that we can accomplish working together, leveraging a little bit of your resource, a little bit of my resource, a little bit of their resource. And I think he did a pretty good job of kind of explaining how that worked out in North Carolina. I'm gonna give you the real world example at Fort Benning. So the woodpecker wars on Fort Benning, 1990, Brandon General said, by gosh, I need a new landing zone for my soldiers to jump out of planes and land on. And everybody went, yes, sir, we'll get it taken care of. So each one of these is, you know, will be challenged. Each one of these is a square, 1,000-meter square grid. I don't remember what that is in acres, 247. I remember. I think it's 247. Anyways, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or so of those. We went in there and cut all the timber down. And we didn't cut any RCW cavity trees. And we didn't cut the bottoms, but we cut everything else. Y'all, that's the fall line sand hills belt between the Piedmont and the coastal plain. Anybody have any idea what happens to those soils? There's no vegetation on them. Where's it go?
In the pond.
In the pond. It's washing away. And I wish I had some pictures and I don't. But long story short, looked like a great landing zone. Everything was great. Then it rained. All the soil washed off, topsoil. It washed down and piled up against the RCW cavity trees that we saved because we were trying to do it right. Or thought we were. And then all the RCW cavity trees died. And we dumped all kinds of erosion into the streams associated with those areas. So out of that, we get a jeopardy biological opinion from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that says, hey, you got to do better. You got to monitor your woodpeckers. You got to start thinking about these things. And, you know, non-discretionary activities required by that biological opinion. One of them was to start restoring longleaf on the installation. So top left, these little light green circles or polygons are longleaf pine, 1980, 1990, and then 2000, and then 2021. We're up to right at 30,000 acres of longleaf pine restoration that's happened on Fort Benning since 1990. You need to start burning more. So this chart, the blue line is the number of wildfires plotted over here, total number. The red bar is the total acres of prescribed burning. The white bar is the total acre of wildfires. And really, you don't see a whole lot. I mean, you can see a general trend in the total acreage of wildfires, but it kind of stays the same because really our policy is to let burn. If we have a wildfire, unless it's affecting something, that's critically important, we're going to step off to the next set of fire breaks. We're going to string fire on it. And we're just going to let that entire area burn. So you don't see a whole lot of change there. What you do see is total number of wildfires and that inversely proportional relationship as we started to do more burning on Fort Benning. Anybody got any idea what that right there is?
Really wet here.
Nope. What? And COVID. So the powers that be in many places, not just the Army, not just DOD, decided that we didn't need to be putting smoke up in there with COVID. So they basically just said and cut us off. So you can tell the next year that we kind of got caught back up, but that's an outlier there. But really the point here, y'all, is if you're doing frequent and recurring prescribed fire on a landscape scale, you're going to have less wildfires and you're going to have less intense wildfires. I think it's something we all know, but to be able to see it on a, 40, 95, 95, 152, 40 years, and to be able to visualize it, I think is really key. See it actually in that applied management happening on a landscape scale.
Do you do anything else besides prescribed
As far as,
or wildfires?
yeah. We do a lot of fire break work, about 1,200 miles a year. We do some mechanical, but not generally really from a wildland fire protection perspective. And then we'll do some chemical treatments, but usually those are more associated with site prep operations for reforestation. So not really, other than having well-established fire breaks that are freshened up every year and trying to keep everything in a 2 to 3 year fire return level. Now, we do have regulations and policies whereby, if a unit's on a range and something catches on fire, they have to stop everything they're doing. They have to call the radio range desk. So, hey, we have a fire on this range. Our folks immediately respond. They're responsible for suppression initially, going breaking supply valves out, and beating fire out to the best of their ability until we can get there. So there's some organizational bureaucracy that helps to limit the impact when we have wildfires. But as far as planting certain species or changing vegetative communities or a bunch of mechanical work, not really. We are starting to look at, and we haven't figured it out yet, we are starting to look at potentially using regenerative grazing practices as a way to maintain that understory as opposed to having to do prescribed fire operations. But we haven't quite cracked that nut yet, figured out how to raise cattle or bison on Fort Benning while we train soldiers. But I think we're going to get there. I really do. I think we're going to get there. And so this plots our RCW active clusters and total potential breeding groups, 1997, 140 potential breeding groups, all the way up to the breeding season last year. I don't have the numbers from this year, but 400 and some odd. A lot of recruitment clusters, a lot of artificial cavities initially, but now we don't do anything. These last probably 7-8 years, all this growth has happened naturally. They're excavating their own cavities, they're pioneering and budding out of the clusters that are there. There's a lot of splits. You know, you got a breeding pair here, and 7 helpers, and all of a sudden one of the helpers goes, you know, 8 trees away. It's like, I'm tired of helping you. I'm doing my own thing. And now you got these 2 clusters that are right next to each other on the landscape. So again, it took something going really bad and really south, right, to turn things around and figure out there's a better way of doing things. Better prescribed fire, fewer wildfires, more red-cockaded woodpeckers, better habitat. Species are winning, missions winning. Collectively partnering with, again, Nature Conservancy had a big role in this in the early days, coming out and doing the first monitoring, doing some of the first writing of our plans as to how we were going to do integrated natural resources management, identifying and inventorying for species across the installation, regardless of what they were. So, on partnership effort in that. And then you just kind of put it all in one. 55 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket is something I like to talk about all the time. You got 100,000 people, you got the mission, you got everything else going on, but just the natural resources. So there's the installation. There's our wetlands and our streams. There's our RCW stands. So all that's either suitable or potentially suitable RCW habitat scattered across the installation. All of our half-mile foraging partitions with the cavity trees. All the known gopher tortoise burrows, those green dots. You notice they're really more concentrated to the north. That's up there and through the middle and northern parts of the installation. That's much of that fall line sand hills area coming through there. I don't even know what we added in there, something. And then a bunch of other, relic trillium, pitcher plants, protected watersheds, critical habitats. And then finally, kind of buried in there, sensitive areas, which could be old historic sites, other protected areas on installation. And to think that we have all of that, and yet we still effectively train soldiers each and every day. You saw some of the pictures and the work that's being done. Pretty neat stuff. All right, so partnerships. So I talked earlier, complementary, right, but not always. Part of what we do, let me go back. We started a program in 2005 to help work with TNC, DNR, others to protect lands outside the installation, basically make the landscape scale ecosystem even bigger than it is. So all the properties that are in green out here are either now protected private landowner with a conservation easement or DNR or TNC ownership. If it's DNR ownership with a Nature Conservancy conservation easement over the top of it that reserves the arm's interest. Almost all of that now is open for public access. That was one of the most underserved public access areas in the state up until about 2008, 2009. So there's about 30,000 acres out there that's open now. The other thing we did creatively, and it took about 3 years to get it all through the wickets to get the Army to bless off on it. But we entered into an endowment agreement with the Nature Conservancy. And so to your point about credits earlier, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requires 3 things for you to be able to get credits for species. See if I can remember them. Perpetual protection, so a conservation easement. Perpetual management, so some management plan that says how you're going to steward this landscape from here on out. And perpetual funding to execute and implement that stewardship. And so that endowment afforded us that opportunity. And we turned around and we went to the Fish and Wildlife Service and we said, these acres of habitat in this condition are worth X or X plus 5 or X plus 10 or 100, depending on their state. And we defined a conservation value for those properties to be able to say, okay, we need to do something on the installation. We're going to offset that impact inside the wire with this great conservation work that's happening outside the wire. And then on an even bigger scale, one of the roles that I have is sitting as the chair of the Georgia Sentinel Landscape Executive Committee. And really, we're looking at all of the potential environmental considerations, natural resource, let's not say environmental, all the natural resources considerations and incompatible development considerations that may affect the missions across this state. So we have, I think, 9 military installations in the state of Georgia. And so this map over here, Georgia Sentinel landscape within these purple boundaries is really looking at work that can be done to protect the military mission and the military value afforded in the state of Georgia. These weird looking shaped polygons and corridors were the gopher tortoise sheds that Steve Friedman and others with Georgia DNR identified. And for those that may not be aware, we finally protected the last parcel that gave us enough populations of gopher tortoises in the state that helped support, maybe didn't entirely, but the Fish and Wildlife Service's decision not to list the gopher tortoise in the eastern range. So that was a big, huge statewide project, DOD, DNR, Forestry Commission, U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, all pooling money together, protect properties all across the state of Georgia to be able to demonstrate that we had enough minimum viable populations of gopher tortoises in the state to help preclude listing. Big win when you start thinking about the costs that come to the DOD mission, agriculture, development, all the things that happen across the state and the economy for the state. So that was one of the big things we've been able to do so far. Also working, coastal resilience, restoration efforts on the coastline related to shoreline erosion and other such projects. And then really just trying to sustain compatible forestry and agricultural practices in those landscapes and footprints close to military installations to keep from getting more residential, commercial, industrial type developments that aren't necessarily compatible with our mission. A bunch of smoke leaving Fort Benning right now is okay going to the east, and we have predominantly westerly or northwesterly winds, and Columbus is on the west side, so it works out all right. If we had Columbus on our east side, we'd have some major issues with respect to being able to maintain that landscape. Not to mention more residential neighborhoods, big guns firing, making noise, light pollution. There's a lot of things the military does where they need to be able to work in dark ops, in dark skies. You get development and other things, you get light pollution. One installation, I can't remember which one it was, I think it was Campbell maybe, had so much development on one of their boundaries that the mission they did there, they had to move it inside the fence line like 2 miles to get far enough away. So they basically lost 2 miles of this entire stretch of the installation where they could no longer accomplish their mission. All right, and then so I talked a little bit about crediting land management outside. So this would be the cover for the management plan, the perpetual management plan for all those lands that are outside the installation, and just a land cover map showing what those forest stands and conditions are. We've got one for age, one for structure, one for composition, and then ultimately being able to project when you can establish red-coated woodpecker clusters to begin to repopulate that part of the landscape. I know I'm talking a lot about woodpeckers, y'all, right now. I have all day because it's really what drove us to where we are. But we're at the point now where it really is about the ecosystem and not the individual species, right? It's about managing that system as a whole. How does it benefit everything? Yes, there's some niche species that you got to protect, this little piece of dirt or this little patch of water for this thing. But generally speaking, we're really focused now more on landscape scale efforts to the benefit of the whole. Talked about crediting. This was a consultation we did with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We needed to open some new targets on this range. Actually, we closed a bunch of targets on the range when it was built because it was impacting woodpecker habitat. When we got this consultation done, we opened them back up. The reality is the impacts are pretty negligible, but there was the potential to adversely impact and potentially have take associated with that action. So we offset these incidental takes with some of the credits from off post. Y'all, I've been talking a lot now. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? What do we have about time we're supposed to be done 5?
Well, 4:30 usually.
Oh, sorry.
5 to 10 minutes of questions?
Yep. Sorry, y'all. I don't know why I thought it was 5. Real quick.
Yeah.
I talked about the IGSAs, so partnerships, y'all. I already talked about these, but just wanted to highlight how important they are to us doing our work each and every day. Laundry Creek is a big project. ETA, Carl Vinson, some folks from Warnell, some folks from College of Agriculture, Environmental Design. worked with us to lay out, we're trying to figure out how to make this project happen. Basically, a creek that crosses our airfield that at one point was diverted and would put it back in its natural watershed. So really thinking outside the box kind of stuff here. I mentioned the part about landscape scale conservation. We are at a point now where we're consulting with the service, basically to make a defined conservation commitment that we would do a certain amount of conservation effort on the installation. The reality is we would always exceed that. But as long as we are meeting our commitment, then we would have the flexibility to be able to do what we need to do to support the mission. Kind of transforming the way that DOI and DOD interact. So we're close to getting this across the finish line, which really will be critically important to both of our missions and streamlining some process for all of us. But basically, we would commit to having a 350 RCW PBGs, 42,000 acres of suitable habitat for RCWs, maintain our drains and our wetlands, maintain a certain amount of acreage for gopher tortoises, all down the line, right? And as long as we're always meeting that commitment, if we need to take an action somewhere and I don't know, clear 500 acres up here for something, as long as it doesn't bump us below our commitment, then we're offered and already afforded incidental take that may happen in any of those species. I'll skip over the tribal consultation piece. I've already really covered that. So I'll close with this, y'all. Get to know people, who they are, not what they do. Talked about that a little bit earlier. Enjoy learning from your failures. Oh, there it is. Never settle at success. It's only temporary. So I appreciate y'all's time today. Happy to take questions.